Good morning on this Sunday, November 26th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. The nation mourns the passing of former First Lady Rosalynn Carter. A look ahead to the 2026 race for Georgia governor and GOP divisions. The redistricting special session is set to get underway this week, and debate heats up over transit on the BeltLine. Kathy, Phil, Alicia, and Martha are all here. I'm Deidre Dukes and for Lori Geary. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Georgia and the nation are mourning the passing of former First Lady Rosalynn Carter. She was 96 years old. Mrs. Carter died peacefully at her home in Plains on Sunday, surrounded by family. Married in July 1946, Rosalynn and Jimmy Carter forged a partnership that lasted 77 years, taking them from Plains to the governor's mansion and then the White House. Along the way, Mrs. Carter served as a lifelong champion for those suffering from mental illness, breaking down stigmas that keep many from getting the help.
Get people talking about mental illness so that everybody in our country can realize that it's just an illness like any other illness. It can be diagnosed, it can be treated, and almost everyone suffering from mental illness can be helped.
The Carters embraced life after the White House, founding the Carter Center in 1982. Together, they worked for free elections in more than 100 countries, tackled diseases like malaria, guinea worm, and river blindness. Back in Southwest Georgia, Rosalynn Carter created the Rosalynn Carter Institute for Caregiving, supporting 60 million Americans caring for parents, spouses, and children. Still holding hands into their 90s, the Carters were the longest married presidential couple in U.S. history. Asked about the secret to a happy marriage, they credited giving each other space and reconnecting daily with their Christian faith.
If we have arguments during the day, which we do frequently, we try to be reconciled to each other every night before we go to sleep.
It's hard to keep fighting after you read the Bible.
Indeed. Former President Carter issued a statement following his wife's passing saying, "Rosalynn was my equal partner in everything I ever accomplished. She gave me wise guidance and encouragement when I needed it. As long as Rosalynn was in the world, I always knew somebody loved and supported me." And Kathy, tributes have been pouring in for Mrs. Carter, who was greatly admired for her humanitarian work.
Yeah, and what a gift. What a gift, and how proud are we as Georgians to have had them as a member of our, kind of our civic family. And I was listening to Jason Carter, their grandson, being interviewed this morning, and he was just talking about, his feelings as a very grown man, who enjoyed his grandparents well into his life. And I think we benefited from that too. They just never stopped contributing, and we never stopped learning from them. And so I'm grateful, and we're going to miss her.
Yeah. And Martha, I was at the Carter Center interviewing people who had just so many loving comments and remarks to make regarding the Carters, and they really talked about how they admired that 77-year partnership and the time that they spent both at the White House and in the decades that followed working together, a true partnership.
It was a true partnership, and what a man ahead of his time, saying that she was a part of everything that he did, and it's just a wonderful thing to hear. And for me as a Christian, the way I look at it is a celebration that she's whole now. She is in the place that she dreamed of her entire life, heaven, and she is looking down upon us now. And Mike Lukovich, who a lot of times I don't like his cartoons because of the way he writes, but it was a beautiful cartoon of her going into the pearly gates. And if we will believe what we believe, then she's made whole now. She doesn't have dementia anymore. She's got all the memories. She's got all the things. And for me, that is comforting, and it makes me smile.
Yeah. Fully restored.
Fully restored.
That's right. And she really did, Alicia, live a life of service and did so much for really the world.
She did, and for me it's bittersweet. On one hand, it's sad. I think about the Carter family, they've lost their grandmother, their mother, and so condolences to them, of course. But it's also sweet because you get to think about her legacy, her work in mental health. Again, you talk about the timing of her leadership and talking about mental health and how important it was, their work around election safety. And so I think the best way we can honor her is to continue her work and the work of her husband and the partnership that they had.
And such a great partnership, Phil. But really, Mrs. Carter truly did so much in her own right. She truly does leave a great legacy.
Well, that's right, and I do agree with Alicia. I think it's a good point with regard to her being a pioneer in Georgia, especially with regard to putting the focus on mental health and trying to help people. And that wasn't a big priority back then. And she was a good political wife too. We had an interview one time, and she was right there talking about all the talking points. And I think that her Institute for Caregiving was a wonderful thing. And Martha, you made a good point about her Christian faith, and she was never apologetic about it. In fact, she extolled that faith to help people.
Yeah, so many people wanting to pay tribute may not be able to make it to the Carter Center, but you can share your memories of Mrs. Carter, offer condolences to the family, and find a schedule of upcoming ceremonies celebrating her life at the website rosalyncartertribute.org. We want to turn now to national politics and the 2024 presidential race in Georgia. It looks like Georgia will once again be a battleground state, with Democrats turning Georgia blue for Biden in 2020, but recent polling showing President Biden and President Trump running neck and neck. And Phil, given that, what lessons did Republicans learn in 2020 that they'll use as they look ahead to 2024?
Well, as Democrats would say the same thing, the lessons Republicans learned is turn out, turn out, and turn out. According to the polling, several polls, they're not even in Georgia. Trump is slightly ahead, even according to the NBC poll that was just released the other day. And as I've talked about on the show before, the independents, ever since Biden was inaugurated, have hemorrhaged over to the right. It's a center-right coalition. It's same thing in Georgia and same thing in a lot of the other 5 what we call the swing states, because about 5 states will decide the 2024 presidential election. And so President Trump is in very good shape in Georgia. I think that when you talk about Biden and his popularity, you've got 70% of Democrats and Republicans say we're going in the wrong direction. I know the Democrats are very worried about the hemorrhaging of the black male vote, especially. The Latino vote is hemorrhaging. I think you're seeing a little bit of that with the young vote, and it's kind of sad to point this out finally, but some of the young people that are taken in by this propaganda about Hamas and, free Palestine and all this stuff, they don't like Biden and the Democrats. There was a riot in front of the Democrat National Committee the other day, so that's not helping the Democrats.
Yeah. And Alicia, if you do believe the polling, if those numbers are accurate, it is clear that Democrats will have their work cut out for them this go around.
Yes, and we have to understand this is not new, right? Any president who's up for re-election usually is lagging in the polls the year before. Same thing happened with President Obama in 2011, so that doesn't worry me as much. I want to mention the point that you did about the youth vote. We saw in the AJC poll that I think Biden has a 40% lead on Trump among voters who are 18 to 29, which is a little low. And so when you think about the 2020 election, young people were about 20% of voters in the state, which is the highest in the country. And so I think the Biden administration has some work to do in that regard. But at the end of the day, I'm not worried. I want voters to remember celebrating, I think it was a week or two ago, where we celebrated the signing of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, where because of that law, billions of dollars have come into our state for bridges and roads and seaports. And so we have to think about his record and what he's actually done. And I think people remember that and vote, again, as I said a couple weeks ago, for the adult in the room who's going to make sure that he brings this country together and does work that needs to be done, because we're divided and we need real leadership right now.
Yeah. Martha, we do have to, in looking at both former President Trump and President Biden, it looks like they are going to be the 2 candidates facing off this next election. And they both do have some high unfavorability ratings to work with.
Yeah, I tell you, it's kind of like there's an old saying in politics: if you're explaining, you're losing, and we do have this challenge on the Democratic side where you've got people being kind of dispatched by the administration to say, oh, you people that think things aren't good, you just don't understand what we've done. And it's hard to make that disconnect between the average family that is paying more for everything and really our economy is better than most of the rest of the world. But the average person doesn't care about that because they're not living in most of the rest of the world. They're living where they have to pay for groceries and gas and all that stuff somewhere else. And then on the Republican side, we've got a challenge that I think there's probably less than a 5% chance that it'll be somebody besides Donald Trump. But then the question is, where do those voters go? How will they come out? Are we going to stay home if we don't get what we want? And I think that, to Phil's point, it's turnout, turnout, turnout. You know, we've got to make sure that we do as good a job as the Democrats do of turning their votes out. And that's what we have to work on, because we are a divided country, but I don't think we're as divided as people think we are, and that it's going to take people getting on the ground. And it concerns me that it's likely we're going to have two people on the top of the ticket that are divisive, as opposed to bringing people together.
Yeah, and Kathy, I'll let you have the last word. Of course, we know we're about a year out. A lot of things can change in a year's time.
Well, there's one thing for sure that we do know. There's going to be a lot of television and radio ads sold.
Amen to that.
I'll just leave it at that. I think you guys have done a great job of summarizing our challenges.
Well said. All righty. Up next, Georgia lawmakers are scheduled to reconvene this week for a special session to debate new voting districts. We discuss next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Governor Ryan Kemp will convene a special session of the General Assembly next week after a federal judge ruled the state's congressional, state Senate, and state House districts were drawn in a racially discriminatory manner. Well, the special session is scheduled to begin November 29th. And Kathy, a lot at stake for Republicans and Democrats.
Well, there is, and you know, there's up to 5 House seats and 2 Senate seats that are being discussed that could be added here, really on the Democratic side.
State House.
State House, yes, thank you very much. And you know, potentially 1 new congressional seat. And so you know, all of those things, the stakes are really high, particularly the congressional seats, because we, you know, could well see the whole House flip as a result of changes that are going on across the South in court challenges that we've seen. So I wish we could see the maps a little sooner. I certainly wish that average folk were drawing those lines, but that's not what's going to happen. So we'll see it. It's going to be fast. It's going to move fast, and then we'll pick up the mess after it's over.
Yeah, and talk about moving fast. Martha, with the 2024 elections looming, the judge has told state lawmakers to get this done by December 8th.
Yeah, and I think they will. I mean, I've talked to a number of folks on my show, a number of state representatives, and I think they've got a plan, and I think that it's going to be not probably as I don't understand the 5 and 2, meaning that we've got to have it go Democrat or whatever. I think we're still going to have a strong Republican House and Senate. And then as far as the congressional seat goes, as I pointed out last time I was on, I live in the 9th Congressional District, which in the last time they put half of Gwinnett County into our district. I'd like to see that looked at, but I don't know if they will get to that, because it really doesn't have much to do with the rest of the district that you have there. So that was a case where it's a very safe Republican district, but it maybe could be drawn a little differently. So I'm looking at that.
And to Martha's point, Phil, even with the changes, we still should see a Republican majority in both the House and Senate. That shouldn't change.
You will. And the state House, the key number to look for is 100. You don't want the Republican majority to dip under 100 seats. It's not going to happen. I've been talking to some folks on the reapportionment committees. In the state Senate, I'm predicting the numbers will stay the same. And what we're going to do, I say we, the Republicans, they're going to pick some of the black majority districts that are represented by white Democrats, and they'll knock out the white Democrats, and they'll still be black seats. So you can see kind of that strategy formulating. So as for the congressional, you have 9 Republican seats, and you have 5 in our Georgia congressional delegation. Will that change? That's the big question. So I don't know how the maps will go in that. That's something to look forward to.
That is the big question, Phil. I agree.
Yeah, and Alicia, ultimately the goal is for these new districts to better reflect Georgia's growing black population.
Yes, and I think that's the most important point here. And I think it's important now to point out, too, I want to recognize the members of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. They were one of the plaintiffs in this lawsuit. This is about protecting the Voting Rights Act. I'm a former legislator. I've gone through a couple of redistricting sessions before, and I wish that Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act was still in place, because that would have required pre-clearance. And I think if they had to clear that with the Department of Justice, we probably wouldn't see this map. It's fine that Republicans are going to continue to be in control, but they went too far by ignoring essentially the voices of 500,000 black and brown people in the state. And so that's what the job is, and they are required to draw these 5 seats in the House, 2 in the Senate, and 1 congressional. And so it is vital that we don't ignore the voices of people and ignore the growth in Georgia that has happened. And that's their responsibility. You can protect your majority, you can play the political game, but you have to respect and honor, right, the federal law, which is the Voting Rights Act.
But just one quick point about Section 5. I mean, that was put back into the legislature, meaning the Senate and the House, to rewrite it because the terminology they were using was from like 1963, and so they were saying that they needed to update it, and the Congress hasn't done it yet, among many other things. So this is something they should do because that's what the Supreme Court said, is that put it back into the Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we've got just a little bit of time here. We're going to talk about preview of the 2026 governor's race with Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones releasing an attack ad against Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. Now, the ad goes after Raffensperger for skipping a Senate hearing focused on the state's electronic voting machines. Martha, clearly no love lost between these two.
No, and this came the week after Kelly Loeffler, who runs Greater Georgia, made a similar claim. So it's kind of like the kind of piling on to Brad Raffensperger, and we'll see what happens there. And there are three people that they're talking about running for governor. Also, Chris Carr, Attorney General, said on my program several months ago that he is thinking about running for governor. So we're going to have a big stable, if you will, on the Republican side, but I think you'll have the same on the Democrat side. It's going to be an open seat next time, so anybody who's ever thought about running for governor will probably see their name.
All right.
It just won't be as ugly on the Democratic side.
Oh, come on.
You don't know
ugly right now. It is ugly. If you watch what's happening, take Cobb Republicans as an example, that passed a resolution to censure their sitting Republican governor, Governor Kemp. So it's caused a lot of division in the party. Republicans aren't talking about it, but there's a real faction, right, between
what if Fonnie Willis runs
Trump
against Stacey?
Republicans and the rest of the party. And I think they're destroying the Republican Party, and we need to talk about that because they're not only destroying the party, they're destroying the country. And so it's sad, frankly, to see this division among Republicans. I think it's also disrespectful to be talking about, I think, when you have a sitting governor who only has a few more sessions left, all of these folks talking about a 2026 election when you have a governor.
Well, it's true that
let him govern right now.
You have to look ahead in politics. You must look ahead.
Well, and it's true that
and you
Governor
can have
Kemp
some
has
divisions in the Democratic side, too. I mean, it's an open secret that Keisha Lance Bottoms, who's Biden's person in Georgia, does not like Stacey Abrams. Fonnie Willis could be your rising star, and that could get ugly.
You just made all that up, but thank you.
Really.
Thank you for painting the picture.
This is what we do.
We
we speculate here. That's what they pay us for.
All right, we'll leave it there. Moving on. Debate continues over transit on the Atlanta BeltLine over plans to invest $3 billion for a streetcar expansion. We discuss the pros and cons coming up.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
A debate is brewing over transit on the BeltLine and the expansion of the streetcar. The group Better Atlanta Transit is questioning plans to invest $3 billion to build rail that could take decades to finish and disrupt neighborhoods along the BeltLine. Kathy, this plan is getting a lot of pushback right now.
Well, my goodness, I started working on this project in the last century. I've been waiting 20 years for the sidewalk to be finished. But let me be clear, when we started working on the BeltLine, it was a transit project. I chaired the city's transportation committee and was concerned that MARTA didn't take anybody anywhere. Once you got into town, you couldn't get anywhere from there. When Ryan Gravel brought his project to me and I saw that you could actually connect to MARTA stations at the kind of the 4 compass points, it began to think about how we could connect out of traffic, not tunnel underground, and build transit. That's still my vision of it, and I think it is for the vast majority of people once they start to understand. We rezoned the entire circumference of the 22 miles of the BeltLine to transit-oriented density because that's what MARTA said we needed to be able to build transit. I don't know that MARTA can do it, but I know that there's plenty of companies out there that would love to have a shot to tell us how much it really costs. And let me just say, the people with the Better Atlanta or whatever they're called, those were the same people that didn't want us to have the BeltLine at all, and many of those same people wanted us to have the streetcar, and we know how good that is.
And Phil, of course, opponents believe that this money could be better spent to address immediate needs in transportation.
Well, I agree with that, and I think, and Kathy, you made some good points, but rail is far too expensive. I mean, spending over $3 billion over several decades is crazy. We have other options. We can look at MARTA. We can look at some other things. Let's finish the BeltLine.
Yeah. With transit.
With transit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Alicia, when it comes to this issue, I think we can all agree that something needs to be done, and it needs to be done sooner rather than later.
Yes, and I think there are strong arguments on both sides. I mean, both sides. I have gone to the BeltLine. My family and I enjoy it. I will say that I wonder what it would be like to have a rail, driving by when I'm walking or riding a bike. And so I think there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen. I appreciate what the mayor is saying right now, that we need to bring people together, which is what he does, right? I do think it's also important to point out that probably to Kathy's point, that there's this $90 million, right, that's been invested for the streetcar to be built and then to go into the Krog City area. And so I think that needs to be completed. I think that MARTA needs to be at the table, the city needs to be at the table, all of these organizations that are having these conversations, you've got to protect green space. And so there are a lot of questions, and I think this discussion is important and needs to continue.
And it certainly will. All right.
So I just want to say quickly,
Sure.
David Ralston, the former Speaker of the House, talked a lot about transportation, and it was difficult to get through because of many other reasons. But I have to agree with Kathy on this one. I think it should be completed. I think that we need it. We have gotten to be a world, we talked about it before the show, we've gotten to be a world where people want more of this walkability and ability to get from one place to another.
But you don't want
much
rail
easier.
for billions of dollars, do you?
I don't know if it'll be rail, but it's got to be some kind of transportation that gets people from one place to another rather than automobiles.
And you can't ignore the other transportation needs that exist in the city of Atlanta too. I think that's been a great point that's been brought out as well. And I think both need to happen.
Yeah, all right, the debate continues. Yes. All right, well, moving on. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is out with a new book, and she recently joined Martha on WDUN's The Martha Zoller Show to talk about her new book, MTG. Martha, what led the Congresswoman to write the book?
Yeah, she believes that she has been misrepresented in the press and that she wanted to tell her side of the story. And she does start from, when she's sworn in 2 days before the January 6th riots, and tells that story very, very poignantly. And I will tell you, my experience with her is to have very good conversations with her. Sometimes I don't like what she does out in public, but she is a very interesting person to talk to one-on-one, and it's a great interview. And I think the book will do very well. She's of course planning for her future. She needs to change the narrative on how people talk about her if she's thinking about a statewide race or something like that, which she could be. But it was a very interesting discussion.
You talk about future aspirations in the writing of the book. Did she give you any
No,
clues?
she did not. She did not. She did not during that, but I think she really wants to tell her side of the story about how she has operated in Congress, and she feels like she's been misrepresented. She addresses several things that have been attributed to her that, like Jewish space lasers. She says, I never said that, and that got attributed to me, and so she wanted to clear up a number of things.
All right, and she certainly did that in the book.
She did.
Her side of things.
Her side of things.
Yes.
That's what books are about.
All right, okay. Coming up, winners and losers. We'll be right back.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, time for winners and losers, and we'll start with you today, Martha.
Yeah, of course. I have to just say one more thing about Rosalynn Carter. I mean, the Caregiver Institute that you talked about, Phil, is so important, and so many of us are in that place in our lives where we are caring either for parents or children, and it is really important that that work goes on, and I would like to see it expand. So she is a winner, and she's also a winner for her unabashed discussion of her Christian faith all the way up until the day she died. And then my loser this week is Joe Biden, the president, and the people that have to defend his record, because it is saying to the American people, what you are experiencing is not true, what we tell you is true, and I just think that makes him a loser for the week.
All right, Alicia.
So this week, my husband and I had the great opportunity to go to Powder Springs Elementary to visit 4th and 5th graders to talk about college experiences. And so I want to give a shout out to Miss Payne and Miss Clark's 4th grade class at Powder Springs Elementary. It was great to be with you when we went to a lot of other classes, but they made quite an impression. And I promised that I would give them a shout out if they watched the show. So I hope you're watching, and remember to go to college. And if you're a female, remember to go to Spelman. I also want to give a shout out to Anita, who works at Walmart on East-West Connector. I was there. I may or may not have been getting some pie, some pre-Thanksgiving pie. And as soon as I walked up, she said, "You're on Georgia Gang," and she watches every single week. So thank you, Anita, for watching us, and thanks to all of our viewers who are watching, and I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving.
All right, Phil.
Well, a few weeks ago I made losers of the Cobb County Board of Elections Democrats who did not want to have the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, things are turning around, so I'll make some winners, the Democrats that finally allowed the pledge, except for one Democrat refused to stand and take it, Jennifer Musbacher. She's a loser. And also, there was a bill just the other day in Congress where only 54 members of Congress did not vote to strip federal funding from campuses that promoted anti-Semitism. And I will give credit to the 3 of the Democrats in our congressional delegation. All the Republicans voted to strip the funding. But I was very sad that Nikema Williams and Hank Johnson refused to make that condemnation of anti-Semitism. Losers.
Kathy.
I want to just note the passing of Atlanta artist Radcliffe Bailey this past week. He's a homegrown phenom, went to Mays High School, Atlanta College of Art, and then to the world. So we're going to miss him and thank him for his many contributions.
Yes, indeed. All right, thank you all, and have a great week.